Why was she sitting alone in the corner of the briefing room, as if no one could see her? The others were talking, laughing even, their voices carrying over the hum of the projector and the flick of paper maps. But she sat still, her eyes down, her hair tied back in the same simple knot she always wore in the field. Nobody noticed the way her fingers traced the corner of the table, silent, controlled. It was as if she had trained herself to disappear, until she didn't want to anymore. The colonel's voice echoed. The timing will be critical. Intel suggests movement at 0300. Entry will be through the north alley, no lights, no sound. Extraction window is tight, 30 minutes, maybe less. No one glanced at her, not once. And she preferred it that way. But deep inside, a whisper gnawed at her. They'll see. Not tonight, but after tonight they'll remember. Her name wasn't on the roster for glory. Her photo wasn't on any wall of honor. She wasn't the one journalists asked about when they came through the gates. She was just another shadow in a long line of shadows, always in the background, always silent. Yet in less than 24 hours, her silence would be shattered. The operation had no room for hesitation. A hostage recovery, high stakes, no margin for error. Every man in the room looked eager, trying to mask it behind bravado except her. Her pulse was steady, her breath even. If she was afraid, no one could tell, not even herself. Questions? The colonel asked. Chairs squeaked, boots shuffled, a cough broke the silence. She stayed still. But there was one question burning inside her, one she would never ask aloud. Do you know what this will cost me? Do you even care? The colonel dismissed them with a nod. Gear up, wheels up at 2200. Men stood, stretching, talking in low tones. Someone clapped another on the back. Someone else cracked a joke about the weather. She rose slowly, gathering her notepad, though she had written nothing on it. Her notes were inside her head, etched sharp and permanent. As she moved to the door, one of the younger operators bumped into her shoulder. He muttered a quick sorry, not even looking back. She gave the faintest smile, an expression no one caught. Outside, the air carried the tang of rain on metal. Floodlights glared against the tarmac, painting the world in pale yellow. Helicopters waited in their rows like restless beasts. Somewhere nearby, a generator droned. She walked past it all, her boots steady, her figure blending into the night. But inside, something else stirred. Not nerves, not doubt, something heavier. Memory. A house, a kitchen table, a folded flag. She pushed it away, not now. In the barracks, she opened her locker. Everything inside was lined with precision, rifle parts polished, field kit neatly folded, photographs tucked in the smallest corner. Only one photo faced outward, a boy about 12 with the same quiet eyes she carried. He was laughing in the picture, caught mid-motion, holding a baseball glove too big for his hand. Her hand lingered on the photo. Then she shut the locker with a firm click. They thought she was invisible. She let them. But her son would never think that, not after this. He'll know who I was, even if the world forgets. The team moved fast that night. Blacked-out vehicles, rotors slicing the sky, the smell of jet fuel and adrenaline mixing into one. They wore their masks of routine, checking weapons, tightening straps, trading muted jokes. She moved among them like a ghost, silent, efficient, her presence unremarkable. At the edge of the hangar, someone finally noticed her. "Hey, you're with us." It was Sergeant Mason, a man with a jaw like stone and a voice that carried authority even when he whispered. She gave a small nod. He studied her for a beat longer than necessary, then shrugged. All right. That was it. No questions, no acknowledgement beyond necessity. And that was fine. Because Mason didn't know what she carried inside. None of them did. The helicopter's interior roared with sound as they lifted off, green lights blinking against the blackness outside. She sat near the back, helmet on, visor down, eyes forward. The vibration rattled through her bones. She let it anchor her. Her thoughts drifted, not to the mission, not yet, but to the kitchen table, to the folded flag, to the boy's face. The boy who never asked why she left so often. The boy who didn't need to. ETA 20 minutes, the pilot's voice crackled over comms. She inhaled, exhaled, let the memories fade one by one until only the mission remained. They approached the drop zone low and fast. City lights flickered far below, scattered like broken glass across the dark. Beyond them, the compound loomed unremarkable from above, just concrete and shadow, but inside, lives hung in the balance. The team shifted, checking gear one last time. Mason signaled her. She nodded back, no words. The ramp dropped, cold wind slammed in. And then they were on the ground. Boots hit dirt, weapons raised, movement quick, precise. She melted into her role, eyes scanning, breath measured. Every sound mattered, the scuff of boots, the distant bark of a dog, the faint rattle of a loose shutter in the night wind. The alley swallowed them, walls on either side, darkness thick, broken only by the pale wash of moonlight above. Mason raised a fist. Halt. Voices ahead, two men at the gate, laughing softly, cigarettes glowing like fireflies in the dark. The team froze. Her pulse slowed, her body stilled. And then, without waiting for instruction, she slipped forward, silent as shadow, pressing herself against the wall. One step, another. The men ahead laughed again, oblivious. She moved closer, her breath steady. The mission hadn't called for her to lead. She wasn't supposed to. But tonight she would. Because she saw something the others didn't. A flicker of movement beyond the gate. A shadow where no shadow should be. She raised her hand, signaling a warning. Mason's eyes narrowed. He trusted her, or at least trusted what he saw in her motion. The team shifted, adjusting angles. Seconds later, a third figure emerged from the dark, armed, alert, watching. If they'd rushed in as planned, they'd be dead. Mason's gaze met hers, a silent acknowledgement. Then he gave the nod. And history began to shift. What did she see that the others did? The shadow moved again, deliberate this time. A man adjusting his rifle, hidden in the blind angle of the wall. He hadn't seen them yet, but he was waiting, watching. She pressed her back against the cold stone, heart steady, eyes sharp. One slip and the mission would collapse before it began. Mason glanced at her once more. Then, without a word, he redirected the formation. Two men covered the gate, another circled left. He gave her the signal, you take him. She didn't hesitate. The world seemed to slow as she slipped forward, knife drawn, her boots silent on the dirt. The man shifted, raising his head at the faint scrape of stone, but it was already too late. Her arm wrapped around his throat, steel pressed under his jaw, one fluid motion. His breath caught, a strangled gasp, and then silence. She lowered him gently to the ground, eyes scanning the dark. The cigarettes still glowed at the gate. The other guards hadn't noticed. She returned to the shadows, knife slick, breathing calm. Mason's eyes caught hers again, an acknowledgement, more respect this time. No words. They moved on. The gate fell quickly, two suppressed shots, two bodies crumpling without a sound. The alley opened into a courtyard, pale with moonlight. Beyond it, the compound rose, windows dark, door heavy. Somewhere inside, lives waited. Somewhere inside, a choice waited, one that none of them knew she had already made. They stacked at the entrance. Mason whispered, on my mark. But her mind was already elsewhere. Not in the courtyard, not in the mission, not even in her body. It was back in that kitchen again. The folded flag, the silence of the room, the way her son had stared at it, then at her, as if the fabric carried more weight than she ever could. She hadn't cried that day, not in front of him. She stood straight like she'd been trained, like her husband would have wanted. But when the boy asked, softly, with a voice not meant for war, does this mean he's not coming back? She had turned away, unable to answer. And now here she was, walking the same path, carrying the same risk. Only this time she hadn't told him. "Not tonight," Mark Mason whispered. The door splintered under the charge. They moved fast, rooms clearing in quick succession. Shouts echoed. Boots thundered on stone. The smell of dust and gun oil filled the air. She kept low, weapon raised, sweeping corners. Her body moved on instinct, a rhythm carved into her bones from years of training, years of silence. A man burst from a doorway, rifle half raised. She fired once. He fell, weapon clattering. Her hands didn't shake, not yet. But her mind whispered, one more life taken, one more weight added, how many before you break? Voices called out, clear, but the mission wasn't done. Somewhere deeper inside, the hostages waited. Somewhere deeper inside, the danger sharpened. They pressed forward, hallway after hallway, until the basement door loomed. Heavy, locked. Mason signaled the breach team. Explosives, quick, clean. But she stepped forward instead. "Wait," her voice, soft but firm, carried through the comms. For the first time tonight they heard her. Mason frowned. "What?" She pointed, barely visible but clear. The faint shimmer of wire at the base of the door. A trap, crude but deadly. If they had blown it, the hostages below would have died. Silence settled. Then Mason muttered, "Damn." He gave her a look, longer this time, almost like gratitude. "All right, your call." Her hands moved steady as she knelt, tools from her kit sliding into place. Wire cutters, a probe, every motion exact, careful, her breath measured. One mistake and everything would end. The others watched, tension heavy in the air. Even Mason held his breath. Snip. The wire loosened, the trap disarmed. She stood silent, expression unreadable. The men exchanged glances. No one said it, but the respect shifted in the air. She wasn't invisible anymore. The door opened with a groan. The basement swallowed them in darkness, air thick with damp concrete and fear. And then they heard it. A voice, weak, trembling. "Help, please. The hostages." They moved faster now, urgency tightening every step. Shapes emerged in the dark, men and women, bound, eyes wide with terror. Relief washed their faces as the team cut ropes, whispered reassurances, guided them to their feet. But not all the faces were relieved. One girl, barely 17, stared directly at her, not at Mason, not at the others, at her, eyes wide, searching as if she recognized something. Something she couldn't explain. Her chest tightened, she almost spoke, almost. But the girl's lips moved first, a whisper barely audible. "Don't go upstairs." Her blood froze. Mason barked, "Move them out, we're on the clock." The team began guiding the hostages back, quick and careful. But the girl's words clung to her like smoke. "Don't go upstairs." She didn't know why, didn't know how the girl knew, but her gut twisted in warning. And then, as they reached the stairwell, the building shook. An explosion ripped through the floor above, dust and debris raining down. Shouts filled the air. The hostages screamed. Mason cursed, "Ambush." She raised her weapon, eyes scanning the chaos. Smoke filled the corridor, gunfire cracking from above. Shadows moved at the stairwell, closing fast. This wasn't chance, they'd been waiting. Her instincts screamed. And she realized the truth in that moment. The mission wasn't just about saving lives. It was about who was willing to be left behind. Her grip tightened on her weapon, her breath steadied. She knew without question what her answer would be. How do you move hostages through a burning maze of concrete and gunfire? Smoke clawed at her throat. The stairwell above rattled with boots. Shadows flickered in the haze, muzzle flashes tearing light into the dark. The air filled with the deafening crack of bullets and the raw, panicked cries of those who had been chained only minutes ago. Her mind split in two. One half was soldier, weapon raised, eyes sharp, tracking threats through the blur of smoke. She dropped the first man who rushed the stairwell, the recoil steady against her shoulder, the silence in her mind cold and clear. The other half was Mother, hearing the way the youngest hostage sobbed, hands over her ears, body shaking in terror. Hearing the way that sound wasn't so different from her son's nightmare cries after his father's funeral. "Get them out," Mason roared. His voice cut through the chaos, raw with urgency. Operators guided the hostages back into the basement hall, away from the collapsing stairwell. Some stumbled, half blind with fear. Others froze, paralyzed by the explosion. Every second dragged them closer to death. She didn't move at first. Her rifle tracked the doorway, her body a wall between the enemy above and the terrified civilians behind her. One man, then another, lunged down the stairs. She cut them both down, breath steady, movements efficient. But there were too many, too fast. Mason shouted again, "Move, damn it!" She stepped back, forcing her body to turn from the fight, to follow the hostages into the dark corridor. But her eyes stayed locked on the stairwell until the last possible second. The ambush hadn't been random. Someone knew they were coming. And if that was true, then the night was far from over. The team moved quickly through the underground passage, half carrying the hostages, weapons sweeping for threats. The air was thick with dust, flickering with emergency lights that barely worked. The walls felt too close, the sound of boots and breathing echoing like drums. She kept to the rear, covering their backs. Every few seconds she glanced behind, listening for the chase. But the smoke hid everything, the silence worse than the noise. The girl, the one who had whispered "Don't go upstairs," stayed close to her. At one turn, when the others pushed forward, the girl tugged at her sleeve. Her eyes were huge, reflecting the dim red glow of the corridor light. "They'll trap you," she whispered, "at the street." Her stomach tightened. She wanted to ask how the girl knew, wanted to demand answers, but there wasn't time. Mason called from ahead, "Clear path, let's move." The girl's hand slipped away, but her words lingered. "At the street." By the time they reached the exit hatch, her mind was already racing. The steel door loomed heavy at the end of the corridor. Mason and another operator forced it open, the hinges groaning like an old wound. Cold night air rushed in, sharp and damp, carrying the scent of rain-soaked asphalt. Freedom. Or a trap. She swept the alley outside with her sights. Dark, empty, too empty. Her gut screamed again. "Move them quick," Mason ordered. "Birds are waiting." The hostages stumbled out, some crying, some silent with shock. Operators fanned wide, covering corners. She stayed near the back, rifle steady, ears straining for any sound. And then footsteps. Fast closing. Figures emerged at the far end of the alley, rifles raised, shouts tearing the night. Muzzle flashes split the dark. Bullets sparked against stone. "Contact." The operators opened fire, dragging hostages down for cover. Mason shouted orders, his voice swallowed by the chaos. She dropped to one knee, firing controlled bursts, every round finding a target. The alley lit with violence, the air thick with smoke and screams. And then, amid the firefight, she saw him. A man at the rear of the attackers, not firing, watching, his stance calm, detached, his face barely visible in the moonlight but his eyes locked on hers, cold, measuring. Recognition jolted her, not of the man himself, but of the way he looked at her, as if he knew. As if he had been waiting for her. The thought rattled her more than the bullets. She fired, but he stepped back into the shadows, gone in an instant. And she knew. This wasn't just about the hostages. It was about her. The firefight raged. Mason's men pushed forward, forcing the attackers to break. The last of the hostages scrambled into waiting vehicles, doors slamming shut, engines roaring. "Move, move," Mason bellowed. But she hesitated. Her rifle lingered on the shadows where the watching man had stood. Her heart hammered, not with fear, but with a terrible certainty. If she walked away now, it wouldn't end. They would come again. For her, for her son. Now, Mason's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. She tore her gaze from the shadows and sprinted, covering the final stretch, sliding into the vehicle just as it lurched forward. Bullets chased them, sparking off metal, but the distance grew, the city falling behind. Only then did her body tremble. Only then did the silence settle, heavy and suffocating. The hostages huddled together, whispering prayers, clutching one another. Mason sat across from her, sweat streaked with dust, his eyes sharp. "You saved them back there," he said. His tone wasn't casual, it carried weight. "That trap, that call, they'd be dead without you." She didn't answer. Her hands were steady on her rifle, but her chest felt tight. Because Mason was wrong. She hadn't saved them. Not yet. The watching man's face haunted her, cold and patient in the moonlight. And the girl's whisper echoed still, "Don't go upstairs, they'll trap you at the street." This wasn't over. Not even close. And for the first time that night, she wondered if the mission had ever been about saving strangers at all. Or if it had been designed to test how much more she was willing to lose. Why did the girl keep staring at her? The vehicle rattled down uneven roads, headlights off, engine growling against the silence. Operators sat tense, rifles across their laps, eyes scanning the night through narrow slits in the armor. The hostages huddled together, trembling, whispering, their faces pale under the dim red light inside. And the girl, 17 at most, bruised, dirty, eyes too old for her face, stared only at her. Not Mason, not the others, her. The weight of it pressed harder than the firefight had. She adjusted her grip on her weapon, pretending not to notice, but the girl didn't look away, didn't blink. Finally, Mason broke the silence. "We'll reach secondary pickup in 20. Stay sharp." His voice was gravel, stripped raw from shouting orders, but his eyes lingered on her for half a beat before he looked away. She said nothing. She hadn't spoken again since the warning in the basement. The girl leaned forward suddenly, her voice a whisper meant only for her. "You saw him, didn't you?" Her stomach nodded. She didn't answer. The girl's hands trembled as she clutched the blanket one of the operators had thrown over her shoulders. The man at the alley, watching. Her pulse jumped. The memory of those eyes, cold, deliberate, flashed sharp in her mind. She finally looked at the girl, her own voice low, barely audible over the rumble of the engine. "Who is he?" The girl's gaze flicked toward the others, then back to her. Fear burned in her eyes. Not here. She held the stare for a moment longer, then leaned back, rifle across her knees, silence thick around her. But inside, her thoughts tore at her like glass. The girl knew something. Something that explained why the ambush hadn't been random, why the trap at the basement door had been set so carefully, why the man had watched her, not the mission. This wasn't just war. It was personal. But whose? The convoy slowed, bouncing over broken pavement, then jerked to a stop. Mason cursed under his breath, lifting his comm. Static crackled. No contact. "Out," he ordered. "We walk from here." The night was heavy with mist as they spilled into the street, guiding the hostages on foot. Buildings loomed around them, dark windows like watching eyes. The silence pressed close, broken only by the shuffle of boots and the uneven breaths of the rescued. Every instinct screamed wrong. She moved to the rear again, rifle raised, scanning rooftops, alleys, every shifting shadow. Her body felt electric, alive with warning. That's when she heard it. A faint whistle, high, sharp, almost playful. Then the thud of something heavy hitting the pavement. "Down," she shouted, voice breaking the silence like a shot. The explosion ripped the street apart, fire and debris spraying the night. Hostages screamed. Operators dragged them behind shattered walls, covering with their bodies. Gunfire erupted, sudden and merciless, pouring from the rooftops. It wasn't just an ambush. It was an execution. She shoved the girl down, covering her with her own body as dust and shrapnel cut the air. Her ears rang, her lungs burned with smoke, but her rifle found its mark, dropping the first muzzle flash she saw. Mason barked orders, his voice hoarse but steady. The team fought hard, bullets carving the dark, but they were outnumbered, pinned. And through the chaos, she saw him again. The Watcher, standing calmly at the far end of the street beyond the firelight, hands behind his back, unmoving, his face clear this time, lit by the glow of flames, older, scarred, eyes like stone. He didn't fire, didn't move. Just watched. Her chest tightened. The girl clutched at her sleeve, whispering, "Don't let him take me." The words sliced deeper than any bullet. Not "don't let them kill me." Don't let him take me. She fired toward him, rage sharp in her blood. But the man stepped back again, swallowed by shadow, untouchable. The firefight dragged on, brutal, endless. Mason pulled 2 hostages into cover, shouting for suppression fire. One operator fell, blood dark on his chest, his body crumpling against the wall. Another cursed, wounded, but kept shooting. Her own lungs heaved, her shoulder ached from recoil, but she didn't stop. Couldn't. Every bullet was a promise, to the girl, to her son, to the ghost of the man she had buried. Finally, sirens, engines, the thunder of incoming support. The attackers broke, fading into the night as quickly as they'd appeared. Silence crashed back down, heavy and hollow. The team regrouped, bloodied, shaken, but alive. Mason's face was grim, eyes hard. "That wasn't chance," he muttered. She didn't answer. Her gaze went to the girl, who clung to her arm, trembling but alive. And in that silence, something shifted. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was a shield. And shields don't get to break. Hours later, back at the safe house, the hostages were being processed, medics tending wounds, operators refitting gear. Mason sat at the table with maps spread before him, jaw tight, voice low as he spoke into secure comms. She stood apart by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes hollow, uniform streaked with soot, hair damp with sweat. And in the reflection, just behind her, the girl sat quietly on the cot, still watching her. When Mason finally slammed the comm down, his eyes met hers. "We've been compromised." She said nothing. He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Someone tipped them off. Someone knew our route, knew we'd come through that basement, that street." Her jaw tightened. She had known it already, felt it in her bones. Mason's stare sharpened. "Question is who?" She didn't flinch, didn't answer. But inside, the truth pressed hard. The Watcher hadn't been looking at the team. He'd been looking at her. And whatever this mission had started as, it had now become something else. Something she could no longer run from. What do you do when the silence feels more dangerous than the gunfire? The safe house was quiet, too quiet. Generators hummed in the basement, a low vibration through the concrete floors. Radios crackled with static, no voices coming through. Men moved like shadows between rooms, boots soft, weapons close, as if waiting for the walls themselves to betray them. And she stood by the window, staring at the rain-slick streets outside, her rifle propped against the wall. Her reflection looked back at her, eyes rimmed red, face streaked with soot, shoulders squared in defiance of the tremor she felt in her bones. Behind her, the girl sat on the cot, wrapped in a blanket, still staring, always staring. "Why do you keep looking at me?" she finally asked, her voice low, steady. The girl's eyes didn't waver. "Because he was looking at you." Her chest tightened. "Who is he?" The girl's fingers fidgeted with the edge of the blanket, twisting the fabric. "They called him Kazem. Some of the guards. He wasn't like them. He chose who lived and who didn't." Her voice cracked. "And he was waiting for you." The words slid like ice down her spine. Kazem. She didn't know the name, but she knew the look. She'd seen it in his eyes across fire and chaos. Cold, patient, personal. The door creaked. Mason entered, his face carved hard, fatigue etched deep. He glanced between them, then shut the door behind him. "We've confirmed it," he said, voice low. "The route was burned. They knew we were coming. Someone on the inside." Her jaw clenched. Mason dropped into the chair, elbows on his knees. "I don't like this. We move at first light. Until then, nobody leaves. Nobody talks." His eyes lingered on her a moment too long, not suspicion, something heavier, maybe doubt, maybe calculation. She gave nothing back, just silence. When Mason left again, the girl whispered, "He won't stop." Her gaze shifted. "Kazem." The girl nodded, her voice trembled. "He doesn't lose people. If he was watching, it means—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "It means he won't let you go." The words sat heavy between them. And for the first time, she let herself ask the question that had been gnawing at her since the alley. Why me? She had lived her life in shadows, missions without credit, sacrifices without names. She wasn't the one who drew enemies' attention, who made the stories in headlines. She wasn't the kind they remembered. But Kazem had remembered her. And that terrified her more than anything. Night dragged slow, she didn't sleep. Neither did the girl. They sat in silence, broken only by the distant thunder and the occasional cough from another room. Once, the girl asked her name. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Names don't matter here." The girl tilted her head. "Then why does his matter to you?" She didn't answer. Because she didn't know yet. Dawn came gray and thin. The team packed quickly, loading weapons, checking vehicles. The hostages, now survivors, were herded toward the trucks, exhaustion pulling their shoulders low. She scanned every corner, every rooftop. Her body hummed with warning. They hadn't seen the last of Kazem. She knew it. As the convoy rolled out, Mason rode in the lead, comms buzzing low with coded chatter. She sat near the back again, the girl pressed close to her side. Rain pattered against the roof, steady and cold. Minutes stretched, roads blurred, the city thinned. And then movement. A motorbike darted from an alley, engine snarling, rider masked. Another followed, then three more. Weapons flashed. Contact. Bullets tore into the lead vehicle, glass shattering, metal sparking. The convoy swerved, tires screeching. Shouts filled the comms. She shoved the girl down, weapon raised, firing through the slit in the armor. One rider fell, body twisting against the pavement. Another swerved, spraying rounds into the side of the truck. The girl screamed, clutching her arm, not from pain, just fear. Her mind split again, soldier, mother. Her son's face flared in her mind, laughing with a baseball glove too big for his hand. The way his eyes had held hers after the funeral, as if demanding she be unbreakable. She couldn't break now. Not here, not with the girl clinging to her sleeve like she was the only anchor in a storm. The convoy fought hard, vehicles weaving, gunners returning fire. Two bikes exploded under heavy rounds, flames curling into the rain. The others peeled off, vanishing back into the maze of streets. Silence again. But not relief. Because she knew this wasn't the end. It was only Kazem testing the edges. By the time they reached the extraction zone, her body buzzed with exhaustion. The helicopters waited, rotors chopping the misty air. Operators moved the survivors quickly, lifting them aboard, shouting over the roar. Mason caught her arm as she moved past. His eyes searched hers. "Something you're not telling me." Her lips parted, then closed again. Because how could she explain it? That the enemy's eyes had found hers in the firelight. That his war wasn't against them, but against her. Mason's grip tightened. "If you know something, now's the time." She pulled free. "We move." It wasn't an answer, but it was all she had. As the helicopter lifted, the girl sat pressed close beside her again. her eyes locked on the storm outside. And in that moment, she realized something. This wasn't just about Kazem. It was about what he could take from her. Her son, her silence, her name. She tightened her grip on her weapon. If history wanted to remember her, it would not be as someone who ran, not as someone who hid, but as someone who stood, silent, unseen, until the moment came when she could no longer afford to disappear. And that moment was coming, faster than she was ready for. Who do you trust when the silence inside your own team feels heavier than the enemy outside? The helicopter blades still echoed in her bones long after they landed. Dust swirled in the floodlights of the forward operating base, soldiers rushing, voices clipped, medics pulling the survivors into triage tents. For a moment, she stood frozen in the chaos, the girl's small hand still gripping hers, refusing to let go. And then Mason's voice cut through. "Debrief now." The tone wasn't request, it was order. She glanced down at the girl, wide eyes, shaking shoulders. A medic tried to lead her away, but the girl's fingers tightened, knuckles white. "Stay with her," she told the medic. "Don't let her out of your sight." The medic hesitated, then nodded. The girl finally let go, but her eyes didn't. They followed her until the tent flap closed behind her. Inside, the air was thick, maps spread across tables, radios murmuring in the corner, operators slouched in chairs, sweat and grime still clinging to them. No laughter, no relief, only the heavy weight of knowing the fight wasn't over. Mason leaned on the table, both hands flat, eyes sharp. Someone gave Kazem our route. Nobody spoke. His gaze swept the room. "We don't move again until I know who." She felt the weight shift toward her, not directly, not openly, but enough. She had been the one who broke formation, the one who led them into the alley, the one who carried the girl like she was more than just another survivor. "Maybe it was bad intel," Ramirez muttered, rubbing his face. "Wouldn't be the first time." "No," Mason snapped. "This was too clean, too exact." His eyes narrowed. "He wanted us funneled." The silence after that was worse than shouting. She forced herself to meet Mason's stare, then find out how he knew, but stop circling your own. His jaw tightened, but he didn't press, not yet. The meeting broke, soldiers filing out slow, shoulders tight, eyes low. She stayed seated, staring at the map without seeing it. When Mason finally came close, his voice dropped. "I need to know if there's something you're not saying." Her throat tightened. How could she tell him? That Kazem's eyes had found hers in the flames, that the girl whispered his name like a curse tied to fate, that it felt less like coincidence and more like recognition. She swallowed. "If I had something you'd already know." He studied her too long, too deep, then walked away. The tent felt colder after he left. Later that night, she found herself outside, the desert air sharp, stars stretching endless over the wire. She lit a cigarette she didn't even want, just for the illusion of control. Smoke curled against the night, fragile, disappearing. Footsteps behind her. The girl, barefoot, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, hair wild from restless sleep. "You shouldn't be out here," she whispered. The girl shrugged, eyes fixed on the stars. "Neither should you." A pause. "You're not afraid of me." The girl turned then, her face soft but steady. "He was afraid of you." The words hit like a blow. "Who told you that?" she asked, sharper than she meant. The girl didn't flinch. "I saw it in his eyes when you were there. He doesn't look at anyone like that." Her stomach knotted. Kazem afraid. No, that wasn't fear. That was something worse, something she couldn't name yet. Before she could push further, Mason's voice cut across the yard. "Inside, both of you." The girl ducked back toward the tents. She stayed, meeting Mason halfway. His face was shadowed, unreadable. "What's going on between you two?" "She's just a kid," she said. Kids don't survive men like Kazem, he shot back. Not without reason. Her silence was enough of an answer. Mason stepped closer. His voice dropped. If you're a liability, I need to know now. I won't lose my men because of ghosts you won't name. She held his stare, her heart hammered. And then softer, you won't lose them, not because of me. But the promise felt brittle even as she said it. Because something inside her whispered that the girl's words weren't wrong. Kazem hadn't looked at her like prey. He had looked at her like purpose. The next morning came with orders, relocation, quiet, no chatter on comms. They'd move under cover, low profile. Only the necessary knew the route. She checked her weapon, checked it again, then glanced at the girl climbing into the vehicle. A strange calm settled over her, as if something inevitable was drawing near. The convoy rolled. Desert stretched wide and empty, sun climbing, heat shimmering on the horizon. And then, a crack sharp clean. The windshield spiderwebbed. Sniper, someone screamed. Chaos erupted. Vehicles swerved, dust exploding around them. Bullets tore from unseen ridges. Operators returned fire, blind, desperate. She shoved the girl down, pressing her body low against the floor. Her own weapon came up, scanning windows, angles, movement. And then she froze. On the ridge, a figure still, calm, watching her through the scope. Not firing. Just watching. Her blood ran cold. Kazem. The shot that shattered the windshield hadn't been meant to kill. It had been meant to mark, to remind. The convoy tore through, engines screaming, until the fire fell away and the desert swallowed them again. But she couldn't shake the image, his silhouette, his stillness, his silence. When they finally stopped at an abandoned compound for cover, Mason's face was pale with fury. He barked orders, securing perimeters, checking wounded. Then he rounded on her. You knew. Her chest tightened. What? You knew he was out there, you saw him, and you froze. I didn't freeze. Then what the hell was it? Her lips parted, then closed, because she didn't have the words, not for what had passed between them on that ridge, not for the way his silence had said more than bullets ever could. Mason's voice dropped, sharp as a blade. If you're not telling me something, I swear. A voice cut in from the radio, panicked, fractured. Command, this is Eagle 2, we've got a breach. Internal, I repeat, internal breach. The compound's lights flickered. And in that moment, she realized the betrayal Mason feared wasn't coming. It was already here. Inside. Closer than any of them knew. And Kazem was waiting. When the walls themselves feel like they're listening, where do you run? The compound was supposed to be safe, reinforced, hidden, trusted, but trust was already bleeding out on the floor. Sparks showered from the radio set as another voice dissolved into static. Mason slammed his fist against the table, rage barely leashed. Operators scrambled, securing corridors, locking down doors, shouting to each other in clipped bursts. She stayed still, listening, feeling. The hum of generators, the distant scuff of boots, the girl's shallow breathing behind her. Something was wrong, not just outside, inside. Her hand slid to her rifle. Mason, she said softly. He spun, eyes sharp. Check your men, all of them. He froze just for a moment, long enough to know she was right. The first shot cracked through the compound like a thunderclap. Ramirez fell, blood pooling beneath him before anyone even saw where it came from. Shouting, chaos, return fire down darkened hallways, the compound lit with muzzle flashes, screams tearing against concrete. She dragged the girl behind cover, heart pounding, mind slicing through possibilities. This wasn't an ambush, not from outside. This was betrayal blooming from within. Kazem had someone inside, and they were burning the place from the inside out. Mason fought like a man possessed, dragging soldiers back, barking orders, clearing corners. but his eyes kept finding hers through the chaos, a silent demand. Who? Who sold us? She had no answer, not yet. The girl's hand clawed at her sleeve, trembling. It's him. It's Kazem. He's close. How do you know? She hissed. The girl shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. I just know. And then footsteps, too calm, too steady. A figure emerged from the smoke at the far end of the corridor, helmet off, rifle lowered. Harris, one of Mason's own. For a second, nobody fired. The betrayal hadn't settled into their bones yet. Then Mason's voice, raw, "Don't you dare." Harris lifted his weapon. The shot rang. Mason staggered back, shoulder exploding red. Rage roared in her chest. She fired before thought could catch her. Harris dropped, face frozen in something between regret and relief as he hit the ground. The silence afterward was heavier than the gunfire. One of their own, gone. Not by enemy hands, but by hers. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Mason clutched his bleeding shoulder, teeth bared. He was feeding them all along. Her eyes flicked to Harris's body, the weight of it pressed like stone. The girl whispered almost to herself, Kazem owns people, not just with fear, with promises. Her stomach turned. Promises. That explained the emptiness in Harris's eyes, the strange peace as he fell. This wasn't loyalty, it was surrender. And Kazem had taken it from him. The compound was collapsing, rooms breached, fire spreading. Mason's men fought to hold ground, but every wall felt thinner by the second. She grabbed Mason, shoving gauze into his wound, dragging him toward the fallback point. He resisted, fury still burning. You think I'm leaving this fight? You'll bleed out in 10 minutes if you stay, she snapped. And then he wins. The words cut sharper than bullets. Mason staggered, but he let her pull him. The girl followed, silent, small, eyes too old for her face. They reached the rear corridor where emergency lights painted everything in red. Operators regrouped, bloodied and breathless. Too few, far too few. Mason leaned against the wall, pale, jaw clenched. His eyes found hers. You're still not telling me something. Her throat closed. He was right. She hadn't told him what she saw on that ridge, what she felt in Kazem's silence, what it meant that the enemy wasn't hunting them. He was hunting her. But how could she speak it when even she didn't understand it? Before she could answer, the wall shook. An explosion ripped through the front of the compound, dust and flames swallowing the night. Kazem was here. She felt it in her bones. Not in the blasts, not in the shouts, but in the silence between them, the same silence that had followed her since the alley. The girl clung tighter to her sleeve. He's coming for you. Her chest ached. For a flicker of a moment she thought of her son, his face on the porch steps, staring at her when she left, his voice small, asking if she'd come back. Her answer had been silence, because she hadn't wanted to lie. And now, standing in a crumbling compound, smoke burning her lungs, she felt the same weight of silence pressing down. Mason barked orders again, pulling survivors into formation, weapons ready. His voice was strong, but his body trembled with blood loss. She knew then what was coming. A choice. The girl or the team. Survival or sacrifice. Because Kazem wasn't here for victory. He was here for her, and to draw her out he would take everything else. The first breach hit the rear wall. Gunfire tore through. Men fell, screams echoed. She shoved the girl into a supply closet, pressing her back against the door. Stay here, no matter what. The girl's eyes widened, panic surging. No, don't leave me. She cupped her face firm. If you trust me, stay. Tears spilled, but the girl nodded. She shut the door, turned, lifted her rifle. The corridor ahead was fire and shadow. Mason's men fighting with the last of their strength. Enemies flooding like waves, masks blank, rifles spitting. And behind them, Chasm, calm, silent, watching her, just like on the ridge. Her chest tightened, every nerve screamed to fire to end it. But his eyes held hers. Not mocking, not taunting. Inviting. As if this had always been about her. As if every bullet, every betrayal, every broken wall had only been the path to this moment. She raised her weapon higher. Her breath steadied. And she whispered, almost to herself, "You wanted me, here I am." The gunfire roared. The compound burned. And history leaned closer, ready to remember her name. What is a name worth if it's only spoken after you're gone? Smoke curled like ghosts through the compound. Flames licked at shattered beams, the air thick with cordite and ash. Every sound carried weight, boots scuffing, rifles clicking, breath hitching in the dark. But louder than all of it was the silence between. His silence. Chasm stood at the end of the corridor. Still measured, watching. The men around him fired, advanced, shouted. But he didn't. He only watched her as if the chaos was background noise in a play written for two. Her rifle was steady, but her hands were. Every instinct screamed to fire to end the stare. But something deeper, older, told her that a bullet wouldn't finish this. Not yet. Mason groaned against the wall, pale, blood dripping steady. His men fought tooth and nail, but their numbers were bleeding out fast. And in the closet behind her, she could almost feel the girl's breath, muffled, trembling, waiting for a promise to hold true. The moment stretched. Chasm lifted his weapon, slow, deliberate, not aiming for her chest, for her rifle. A shot cracked. The weapon flew from her hands, clattering to the floor. Gasps, shouts, Mason's voice rasping her name. But she didn't move, didn't reach for the gun. Because Chasm hadn't come to kill her. He'd come to see if she'd stand. She stepped forward. Through fire, through shouts, through the blood-soaked floor. Every bootfall felt like defiance, like tearing free from years of shadows, of being unseen, unheard, unremembered. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to see his eyes. Cold, yes, but not empty, not cruel. Recognizing. "Why?" she asked, her voice raw. It wasn't a soldier's question, it was a woman. He tilted his head, almost curious. His answer was silence. And in that silence she understood. It wasn't revenge, not conquest, not ideology. It was recognition. He had seen in her what others hadn't, strength born of sacrifice, a name buried beneath silence. And in his world, in his war, she wasn't a ghost. She was the opponent he had been waiting for. Gunfire rattled behind her, Mason's men barely holding the line, the girl's muffled cry seeping through the door. Chasm's eyes flicked toward the sound, just once. And she knew. He wouldn't break her, he'd break what she loved, what she protected. That was his war. Her son's face flashed in her mind, the boy she left behind, the boy she could never promise to return to. And the girl behind the door, fragile, afraid, clutching silence like armor. She couldn't let him take her too. Her hands rose slowly as if surrender, but her eyes locked on his, steady, unflinching. "If it's me you want," she whispered, "then take me." The corridor hushed, even the gunfire seemed to fall away. Chasm's men shifted, uncertain. Mason strained to rise, shouting something she didn't hear. Chasm's gaze lingered, searching, measuring. And then he lowered his weapon. One nod, almost imperceptible. The choice was hers. Her breath trembled, but her voice was steady. "Go," she said to Mason's men. "Get them out, get her out." "No," Mason's roar cracked through the chaos. "You don't get to decide that." "I already did." Her eyes didn't leave Chasm. The weight of it was unbearable, the silence heavier than all the bullets in the world. Mason cursed, slammed his fist against the wall, but he gave the order. His men pulled back, dragging wounded, covering each other as they fell away toward the rear exit. The girl's door burst open in the rush. Her small form stumbled out, eyes wide, terrified. The girl screamed her name, reaching. She smiled, soft, painful. "Go!" Two soldiers pulled the girl back, her cries echoing until the night swallowed them. And then it was only her. And him. The compound cracked with distant blasts. The roof sagged, smoke thickening. Fire chewed through what little was left. She stood tall, unarmed, a soldier stripped bare. But no longer unseen. Kazem stepped closer, slow, deliberate, his shadow merging with hers in the firelight. For a moment she thought he might raise his weapon, finish it clean, end the story in blood. But he didn't. He stopped at arm's length, eyes steady. And for the first time, she realized the truth. He wasn't here to kill her. He was here to remember her. The flames roared higher, the roof cracked. And she whispered, so soft it was almost lost in the fire. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The ceiling gave way. Flames swallowed the corridor. And in that final moment, she felt no fear. Only the quiet, steady certainty that her silence had finally spoken louder than any name. That history would remember her, not for the battles she won, not for the medals she never wore, but for the night she chose to stand when no one else could. And when the fire cleared, when the compound was nothing but smoke and ruin, the whispers began. Of a soldier with no rank, no name. A woman who stood unseen, until the night even history couldn't look away.